right, good morning. We have the gang here. Welcome to the Explicit Measures Podcast, Thursday. We are jumping into a new topic here, talking about our BI processes. But before we begin, we were literally on just a phone call. Well, we're on a phone call right now, but just before we started this, we were just arguing about things again. So this will probably be an appropriate intro. I want to intro just a separate topic just briefly. I think this is a good topic for discussion. We'll see what people think. I've been playing with Tabular Editor 3 that has just recently come out. I think it came out on June 1st, officially released. Amazing. Really, it's a huge leap from Tabular Editor 2. Really like the program, and it changes things for me. It's making me rethink how I want to build reports potentially. So I'll just pause right there. Reactions for Tommy and or Seth.
I'll reiterate my reactions as we were talking offline. You're going to derail this entire episode with this conversation.
You need to change the title of the episode.
Well, think of this. So like this to me, that type of tool could potentially really change my BI process. What I do today is I build models and reports, model and a thin report, and then I typically publish them one or separately into, I want a single model to hang off of a single model and many reports. That's what I want to build. And this tool, Tabular Editor 3, has the potential, I think, to really change how I'm thinking about this. And I'm really reconsidering my process in lieu of this new tool. So let me give you a little bit of flavor. I'm being a bit vague here. Let me give you some brass tacks of what I'm thinking. Everything I've taught up until this point has always been build the report locally on your machine. And then Tabular Editor 3 came out, and now I can modify the XMLA endpoint. And now I'm thinking, well, maybe the editing experience of the tabular model is so rich in that program that I feel like I could actually leave desktop alone and not modify the model at all in desktop. Just use desktop enough to get a model in the service, make all my measures in Tabular Editor. I can even look at tables of data. I can make pivot tables in Tabular Editor, so I can view the data to check my measures are working correctly. And then I think I can just build the report in the service and then modify the report. Now, I think there's still some holes in this process, but I think I could do it, and I would like that experience. I could have a single Power BI report open, build it, and then modify the back end of it with Tabular Editor. So I know Tommy's got some opinions about this one. Go ahead, Tommy.
I'm gonna let Seth go because Seth, I think he put it a lot better. I'm gonna hold for a sec.
Okay.
Hey man, I think as we grow as individuals, Mike just skews further towards IT, and Seth actually helps out the business more. I'm kidding. In cases, I agree. We're close. But what you're describing is a very Visual Studio AS-like experience where I have to make changes, then I deploy them, then I can go do something in the report. Now, the funny thing is we're already kind of doing that within reports, right? We have the model. We have to go make changes, or we do this, kind of wonky change the connection first while testing and then change it back and then deploy it. So we're already kind of in this state where there's this disjointed usage of being able to use tools and not have a proper deploy to a test that I can easily connect and switch back and forth to. Now, I would 100% agree with you if there was a better story in the service that allowed us to deploy or hook in Tabular Editor 3 to the test and then just make the switch in the service, because that's a seamless experience to me.
Yeah.
But we're just not there yet. So I laugh at the
my cockamamie ideas.
No, it's very similar. It's a repeatable thing that you see with some of the things over time. But in general, I would lean towards that same sort of change in process. It's just not getting me anywhere quite yet, outside of a very rich experience in Tabular Editor, which I agree with.
Mike, I agree with you. We should definitely be doing more M than SQL. Wait, what?
Whoa.
Sorry. Oh, that was the wrong episode.
Wrong episode. That was last episode.
Okay.
Oh my gosh! I'm gonna reach this camera and bop
that
you.
One down.
Yeah.
Just as much as I'm living down List Generate, you now have that over your head, my friend.
Dude, M's amazing. It's a great.
You're doubling down.
I will double down on M every day.
All right.
Miguel Lopez, hit me up. I'm your biggest fan.
Well, I agree with Seth Hussein, but more on Yes, there's a lot you can do with Tabular Editor 3. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
However, the infrastructure for what Power BI does is not there yet.
Agreed.
For creating these models and then just connecting these models, that infrastructure is not, I think, mature enough, or to use the word, the story isn't there yet where that process would work on a bigger scale. There's some things you can do that fit that need.
Yep.
I completely agree with, but in terms of saying we're going to create a process around this, we're not there yet. And it's not us, or it's not Tabular editors per se, but
Yeah.
it's really the infrastructure and how it works.
So my two biggest grievances with proposing this, and these are the things that I'm hoping to get fixed here in the future, is one, there's no version control. I can't version control a report once I've got it in this. So if I purely make a model and get it to the service and then start making reports on top of that model, I have no way of getting that file out of there.
Mhm.
Not that I technically need it. I mean, again, I'm trusting Microsoft to render it, but I have to also trust that they don't screw it up or corrupt it as well. So,
Right.
like, if I ever wanted to copy out of that or move it to a different user, move it to a different group, much harder. Like there's a hard limit on if I create a report to the service, I can't move it or do anything with it. So now I'm thinking like, okay, maybe I publish like a very thin report where it's like put a text box in it, publish it, and then edit in the service, because then maybe that will let me download it. I don't know. Like I'm going through my head here thinking like, what can I tweak to this process to kind of get this to work? Because I really liked my experience in Tabular Editor, editing the models and publishing was great. And there's no way to your point, Tommy, we need a dev, test, prod for the model. And the model needs basically 3 separate versions of it, and you can migrate that through as well. And I think that potentially could also be possible, but today deployment pipelines don't let us do this, and it's not helpful today to get that architecture right, and it just doesn't help me today.
Yeah, the closest thing you have is the ALM toolkit, but that doesn't say V15, V16. It's just these 2 models. So once you overwrite it, it's over.
It's done.
The only thing you get closest to is using SharePoint with the version control, or if someone's using DevOps. But even then, you still have to connect the 2 files to ALM toolkit. That it's not nearly the same as obviously like what you do in GitHub with code. I think we can be there. That's what, to me, a deployment pipeline should be.
Yes.
Not this cockamamie thing with like right now what's going on. Also, we're forgetting with these live data sets, and for someone who's been doing a lot of it or testing it out with that and composite models, it's still in preview.
Yes.
You know what happens when Microsoft said things are in preview? I say this every time we update. We show an update at the Chicago Power BI user group. If you see a parentheses preview and another parentheses, at your own risk.
Yep.
And we're at multiple instances where we're doing a composite model. I update the source file. Everything breaks for a composite model because it still doesn't, in a sense, recognize it's connected to that live data set. It behaves differently.
Well, that's a great intro.
It is a great intro from
what are we talking about again?
Future potential ways in which we can do things to actual process.
You're right.
Of things that we can control.
I just want to say, if you haven't explored Tabular Editor either 2 or 3, go get it. It'll be worth your time to learn that tool. Huge productivity improvement. Just love it. I just think it's amazing. All right, enough of that mamber jamber. What's your BI process? Let's define a BI process. Let's go from there first.
Yeah, what are we talking about today?
Exactly. We may yeah, we're going over.
So clear definition. What is a BI process? It depends on how many people are in the team. If it's me, it's whatever I want it to be, right? Ultimately, I think it's creating a repeatable method for a team to be able to execute and build same or similar, reports as a starting point. And that part I've got, I think, at least more experience building out and trying to implement, versus the other part of that, which I think should also be part of the process, is the after it's deployed. Tommy, you talk a lot about monitoring usage. I would also say monitoring performance, to whether or not, if you're using capacities and things, is that report performing as expected? Do you have to scale up, down, etc.?
I'd agree with that one a lot. I feel like if I define BI process, I would have defined my process more on the creation and making of reports. It's the art of getting from ideas to something on paper. That's what I feel like it is. And I think in this conversation, particularly with Tommy, in like your focus, Tommy, is heavily on like usage and is it worth the value, and are we getting the the length of effort, right? We spent money and dollars to make it happen. I think that's something that I'm emphasizing more now and figuring out how do I incorporate into my build process a mechanism that allow us to collect feedback and deprecate, plan
Yeah.
to enhance. Where do we put our effort moving forward? We don't know what we don't know. We've got to just dip our toe in, and then so my BI process would be defined as creating a report, maintaining its life, and then being able to deprecate it. So my process, I feel like, should have those three areas to it.
So from a bird's eye view for me, process and to define it, like the purpose of it, it's about expectations. Whether it's the building the report,
Like
the
that.
managing of the content, or the growth of the company. So I basically put the processes like the high level process: build, manage, and grow. But no matter what you're doing, it's all about aligning and establishing expectations at a company. When you're building a report, people know where to submit their ticket. They're not asking you on Slack or Microsoft Teams or a random email, we need this report now. When someone submits a ticket, it's not, why aren't you working on my report? They know that someone's going to come to them and scope out the need of this,
Yes.
and what to expect. It's not going to be built in 5 days. Unless it's coming from your CEO, odds are there's going to follow a certain process. And as you're building the report, what's going to go on, it's aligning that expectations. And to me, it's all about expectations, because if you have people, whether it's on your own team, doing different things when it comes to building a report, like, yeah, Jim, we'll get that to you Tuesday. And then Jim comes to you and you're like, yeah, it's going to be a 3 to 4 week process. Like, well, we got it done last week in 4 days. Why can't you do that? You're breaking expectations. You're breaking what people are going to, what the output is. So to me, any process that's in place is all about establishing expectations from you, communicating with the rest of the departments, to you with the rest of the team on who's going to publish reports, who's going to manage the content, and how do you deprecate, how do you promote.
This to me,
And you
this Matthew Roach presents that triangle.
Are we getting our boxing gloves on again?
No,
Or?
no. I think we're good.
Oh, no.
I just feel like this is a very relevant topic, and I feel like if you think about again, if you haven't watched Matthew Roach's BI data culture, there's a slide in there that has a pyramid, and the base of the pyramid is, BI for the masses. There's a lot of ungoverned. It's in the business. People just need to get stuff done. Type BI. You don't sanction it. And as the further you walk up to the apex of the pyramid, you have enterprise, governed, managed BI pieces. And so the process, Tommy, that you speak to, it feels to me like you're at the top, the upper end of that pyramid. You're talking about a process that lives inside an IT space where you're handshaking with business, you're managing expectations. I feel like there's that portion of it, but I feel like there's also a very low layer of this one where we're talking like it's a lot more hands off. Like your BI process may be very simplified. Granted, those reports probably don't get published to the entire company, but I think there's a spectrum of what happens here. And a small team versus a large team in BI, I think the process changes.
So
go ahead.
Across the board, I'm trying to figure out how we are bucketing some of these conversations, right? Like we have, well, I think this is where these conversations are fun too. I think what I was thinking of initially is like, what is the team build? How do you build out a report, right? What does the team have to do to achieve, the same type of style, expectations, etc. I think, Tommy, you touch on that, but then you're also talking about the implementation process and level setting expectations. And there might be another one in here.
Mm-hmm.
I love your comments, Tommy, because you went like straight into like the hardest part about process in my mind, especially with Power BI, is all you have to do is cheat it once. Cheat a process once.
Yeah.
And
It falls apart.
You mess up this kind of alignment that you or contract that you kind of have with the business, and The painful part is, as somebody who knows Power BI, as a team that, people build reports all the time, like, how long it could take you to throw something out the door. And if you throw something out the door one time,
Mm-hmm.
man, then you set it, you set a different kind of expectation. But it's so painful to, like, this back and forth where, yeah, I mean, to do things properly, you add another X number of days, right? And and that's where, I was gonna end the conversation, but it sounds like we're right in the middle of that.
No, and I think for any of us who've been burned by that lack of process or the lack of expectations, it's ingrained in your memory to never have that occur again. So, have you ever had a situation where someone created an app that everyone was using or workspace and that person left and you can't get access to that because they were the only person who had ability to share. And you're going I spent this is back when I think apps just came out years ago, and it was a rabbit hole. I felt like Sherlock Holmes trying to figure out how'd you get access to this. Okay, this person gave me access. You keep going down and go, where does this report exist? And people are still using it and hasn't been updated in 6 months. And those types of things that happen, or the worst one, and this will be forever ingrained in my memory. And I've spoken to this situation before where it was, not to get into a detailed story, but Monday morning, calm day, 7:30 in the morning. Uh, my chief executive officer comes saying, "This report's what number? How many leads do we have?" Showed on reports like, then why is sales showing us we have 100 more leads? And you're like, I don't know. And because two reports had two different numbers, marketing and sales were meeting, and they were arguing about two different reports. That's a lack of process, and that's a lack of expectations to me.
But
And
that speaks really well though to like having certified things. Like so
yeah,
but this is what we've talked about previously is like,
yeah,
where's that break point of when something's taken over? Like how do we trust this is actually data trust and data quality at some point too. Yeah, yes, that's part of what you're doing from a report build process, but I feel like that's a whole nother topic around just how do you build trust in what you've published and how do you communicate that trust back out to the team. And I can't speak highly enough. Melissa Coates,
mm-hmm.
data governance class that she does, it's like a master's kind of class. It's something that she does for weeks and she goes through, has all of that stuff addressed in her program. And I think, wow, moment after moment she's hitting the nail on the head and like, how do we drive governance and trust in our data? And that is something you have to consider, because when you have those meetings, there needs to be like a moniker, a tag, where this came from. Is it certified or not? And then you can then ask the question, is this a certified data set? If not, who cares if you're gonna have that lower level of the pyramid, that business person, like someone's just ripping numbers out and pulling them together and not know what they're doing. There's gonna be a problem there at some point in the future.
Yeah, I agree with that. What you're outlining, Tommy, is, kind of dovetails into what I would recommend right off the bat, which is if you are a single man show or if you don't have a process, start one now, because the ripple effects of not having one become larger as an organization grows, and it's very hard to unwind, some of the non-process type things that happen, or fix things that have been deployed into the business, where people are you're causing confusion downstream.
No, and I completely agree. And I think this process is obviously even more important if it's a larger team. Take that example of the two contrasting reports. You look at the one the sales is looking at, well, who created that? What data is in that? And to me, that's a lack of process. So process, trust, and expectations are highly correlated, heavily correlated to me. From that, especially that building that report on who's involved, what person's going to be creating it, who's responsible for creating it. If there's a certain metric, like we call them like universal or corporate KPIs, sales, total leads, anything that's kind of across department, that needs to be vetted before that gets published anywhere.
Yep.
So that's just and there's a process for BI teams, and there's a process for whether it's the data analyst to the IT, like the data analyst on the department to IT, and there's a process between there's almost the dance between IT and the data analyst, and the dance between the stakeholder and the department and who's building that report.
And I'm taking notes. I had two of them. I got two of them written down before you moved on there, Tommy. Process, trust, and what's the third one that you were saying?
Expectations.
Yeah, I think those are good. I think those are very three. Like I'm actually like when we start doing talks again in on person, like Tommy's gonna have the build a data culture, and he's gonna have a little triangle on the page or a little three bubbles. We need to have trust. We need to have process. We need to have expectation. That's my Venn diagram. And I think the intersection of all those things is what you have to work toward. But not all of these things are easy. They're definitely not. And I would say a lot of people, you can't have. It's almost like a three-legged stool, right? If you had process, but people don't trust what you're doing, the thing falls apart. If you have process and trust, and you're way off on the expectations, people think you're going to deliver everything in a day, I think you've also missed the mark. So I think these things all have to go hand in hand for something to work well. I like it. That's a really
so I see
one.
I see two roads we can go from here. We can either, to be honest, we can either talk about like our processes, like from building a report, or how do you actually establish that trust through process, or can you?
I would say let's tackle the former. Let's talk about what we do today, because I think I'm just curious about what you guys are going to say, and if it differs too much from where I'm sitting on things, and that'll give some people, I think, a good context of, hey, these guys have been doing Power BI building for 5-6 years now. What are they doing? Like, what is working for them? So kick it off, Tommy. Give us a brief intro. Like, how does your process work?
Yeah, so we have 3 established processes: build, manage, grow. How do we build a report from that request coming into deployment? How do we manage the content, change management, business rules change? We need to deprecate a report. And then finally, how do we get people to adopt using data, adopt using the content in Power BI, and to trust it? So that's kind of our pillars of process, so to speak.
I like it.
I think I already got my Chicago user group June meetup content ready. Oh man, I'm good.
You mean the Chicago and Milwaukee, right?
Milwaukee, yes.
Yeah, we're gonna.
I think that's okay with you. Yeah, but I think,
fine with. I don't have a speaker set up yet. We're gonna need you.
Then I'll send out an invite today and meet up. That was great.
Nice.
I got a title and everything. No, but it's so build, manage, grow.
Yep.
Build is, again, there's a steps for everything where there's expectations, and from who's going to build the report, they know what to do, to the person who's requesting it. And I love this one probably the most because this is one of the easier ones to establish and the easier one for people to understand the expectations. Once you start saying you can't request a report until you submit it into our help desk, like we don't work on anything unless it's in here. So, and all those calls like, hey, can you build that report? It's like, yeah, just submit a ticket. And you might get that odd look at first, but over time, people understand this is where you have to go.
Yeah.
And any report that's being built, once we get that request in, we work with our team saying, do we already have a report like this? It's basically like our workflow or decision tree. Like, do we have a report already like this? Is this a business need? Will this provide impact across the business, or is it just for that person?
You should add the question of, does this save me time or make me money?
I'm
100% firm. Like, if it's not doing one of those two things,
yeah,
that's a legit question we should be asking ourselves when we're building reports. Does it save me time or does it make me money?
Yeah, and I think that's maybe a better way to put it, but it's the same idea.
Yeah. Totally agree.
And then it's from there, before any Power BI file has been open, it's a call with the stakeholder, the person who requested it. We say, we're going to do a discovery call. And we just go through a series of questions going, the origin of this request. Why are they asking for this? What's important to them? And trying to stay away from the stakeholder asking like what metrics they want and what dimensions they want, and trying to be very high level, because when that happens, they're like, well, I just want sales year to date. And you're like, okay, like we have 18 reports that do that. So what's the aim for? And Seth, you've said this before beautifully in other episodes on basically like what actions are these going to drive?
Yes.
And that's what we try to get to for this report. Like, is it for a campaign? Is it for something? What are we monitoring? From there, we write a project roadmap depending on the size of the report. But we write something, follow up, and we don't work on anything till there's sign off. that stakeholder has to say, yes, this is what we talked about. This is what we're going to start building. And that goes back to expectations. So I heard you correctly, what you said, and this is what we are agreeing on. So that's the first part of the build. I know I don't want to take up too much time with the rest of it. So I would love to hear what you guys think also, like that first step of build, or from building a report.
Yeah, I align very, very closely in many ways to that. Kind of starting in, there's two different paths we have, right? One is we build reports for external facing, in application customers, and a lot of that conversation sometimes we are part of, we want to be, but typically there's other teams involved where UI, UX, project management, so that we're grooming tickets down to like all of that information. What does it need to look like? And we have, less ability to, change or modify things. So I think in this conversation, I'll focus more on like the business side, where we do have a lot more interaction, where we're engaging directly with the business. And Tommy, you hit it up right off the bat with, asking the right questions, making sure that we get the answers that we need, that allow us to understand how somebody's going to use it. What are the actions that they're going to take after looking at the report? Because that type of understanding allows you to think through the problems of building the reports that we all have every time, where it's not just throwing data on the page. It's, why am I going to put something here? Well, I'm going to put this here because after my first iteration, I'm going to go back to the business stakeholder and we're going to have a conversation of why I added this thing, because I'm enhancing the report. Or they said that, they always, filter by brand or something like that. And that's why it's, the top slicer or something to that effect. So you go through that, but I'm gonna dive into several other very specific things that I always, tell or teach people how to do, which is, once you have done that data discovery and you're ready to build, I always create a mapping, right? And if it's in Excel, is, my go-to, just because it easily like breaks down in terms of the hierarchy. But if you start to understand, like, here's what I need to build. Now I need to go find the data. Now I need to understand, like, what are all of the calculations that I need to create to map to these data sets. And I kind of build a flow or a hierarchy of, like, I have the original request that breaks down into this subset of, okay, this is going to be the data. And then I can break it down further of, like, these are the new measures and things I need to calculate. So now I've created context in my own head around requirements, data sets, what's there, what's not there, and before I even open a PBIX file. So whether you're modifying something, whether you're creating a brand new model, like, having that context is now my reference that I can always go back to. And as I build things, I can just grab my DAX measures and throw them, into this contextual sheet. So when I'm done with my first version, I have the checklist, I have the requirements, I have the mapping, I have everything related to the report build in that single spot, and I know that I've done everything. So I think where I've talked to a lot of people, it's that kind of data mapping and mapping exercise that many people don't do, and they get lost in the mix of, like, all of the things that you talked about with not mapping to jumping into report builds. So then it's iteration, right? You have a first version that go back to the business user, test, iterate, make sure that you have everything that they need and what they want. And when we hit that final point of, okay, this is the productionalized thing, documentation, like, especially in larger organizations where there's other teams that are going to be relying on understanding your reports. We do a lot of things around adding context in measures so we can easily extract that. But documenting the report and making sure that somebody understands how to use it, how to go through it. Obviously we want end user stuff, but that's kind of report build. But for internal facing, if somebody has questions and they can't land on your report and understand how it works, and it's a little bit more complex, having a reference point is always extremely helpful to mitigate some of the questions that are inevitably going to come back to the team if you don't answer them on paper somewhere. I would rather like somebody hit me up and say it's over here rather than like explain it every single time somebody's,
Right.
hitting me up with a question.
Don't know if the coffee's setting in now or what you said about the mapping for you. That's blowing my mind right now. But I love that idea because that keeps you grounded, right? That would keep you grounded. If you're already writing the metrics before you open up a PBX file or write anything, you're almost just going, okay, these are the 5 measures that I need. You can build from there, but you have a foundation, you know, that's actually written up. I love that. I absolutely love that.
So I hear you guys talking, and I think these are all very valid things. I hear you, but you're wrong. No. Yeah, I think this is a very, let's call this mid to large BI team perspective on how this is looking. And I think there's a smaller BI team where you still need process, or even like so think of this like a lot of this reporting that we've done is around big reports, lots of data going to customers, or big reports, high visibility going to, impacting really strong on the business piece of this. But I'm also thinking about here, like where does in this process fit what about that business group, right? We have the central BI team, but we have like that one representative. What about that guy who's from whatever the sales team, right? And he's starting to get access to data models, and he's starting to he's got a bunch of stuff he's done in Excel. And maybe that's kind of why I think about that persona, because that's kind of how I walked into it. Like I'm, as Seth said earlier today, I'm more IT now than I probably ever have been, because I'm thinking about sustainability and building bigger solutions, and like that just has to happen. But on the other hand, though, I came from a space where it was wild, wild west. And, I think, again, I'm going back to Matthew Roach's pyramid again, which I got to go find the link and stick it in the chat window. Like, I think there's a place here where the process still needs to be there, but at a very granular level, what do you do? And so I think for me, so I'll just talk about my process. I think it fits very well with what you guys are doing, and probably it's a part of your larger process. But a lot of what I think I do is just, it's organizing content. I do a lot around either in a OneNote or in a whiteboard, the Microsoft Whiteboard app I'm really enjoying now recently, because I have a computer that has a pen, and I really enjoy just sitting down with the person who's either requesting it or what I'm doing even, and think through what are the insights that I need to know about this information. And then to Seth's point, I do a lot of data mapping. Without even touching Power BI Desktop, I will write out what are the insights. I need to know sales. And then I start figuring out what are the dimensions. And now I'm thinking more, again, this is very, very focused on a single report. I think more and more about what are the dimensions and what are the calculations I want. So I really want to think about, how do I slice this information? I know I have some sales, that's my measure, but what is relevant for me to slice it by? Time? What kind of time? How do we integrate with that? Like, is it month? Is it week? Do I need some pre-selectors to give people click this button and get the last week, click this button, get the last year kind of thing? Or can I just throw a date slicer on the page? And what action is that driving me to do? So I think those are the kind of things that I like to focus at. I talk about, I ideate all the insights onto a whiteboard. I've talked about this before. I like writing all the insights on a Post-it note or some kind of, area where I can kind of move them around, get them all on the page. And then I like grouping those ideas together, because there's usually subject matters within your report. There's almost always an overview page, and then there are detail pages that describe certain insights that make sense together. I use the common example, right? We may have, if the whole report is sales, we may have sales by salesmen or regions. That may be like a single topic. And then there might be sales by product. And those may be two detail pages that I use, but are driven, you walk to those pages through the overview page, the main page you land on initially. So I think that in my mind, it's around building the insights, mapping out which insights go together, planning the pages of the report, and then figuring out, okay, do these, and again, I'll even draw the visuals on the whiteboard. Like, I think this is a bar chart. I think this looks like this. Because I think you want to, initially when you're having those early conversations, you want to stay out of desktop, because you're trying to walk a user from their idea through a process to get them to something that they can use. And I think a lot of the times we only know what we know. We only know it's been tables, it's been pivot tables, whatever. And so we had to kind of walk people through this process with them to get them to think a little bit differently. Because I was thinking about this last night. Power BI is really fundamentally changing the game here. Like I feel like we've been doing BI a certain way. The tools that were provided now have given a brand new audience a lot more capability. And I think that is why I really like the Power BI piece here, because it's really giving new capabilities to people who never had it before. Anyways, those are my thoughts on those.
So I think I don't think we're saying different things, right? So even if what you dove into was, I guess, a very important part in the build process. What I would challenge is, regardless of the size of team, are you equipping someone else to understand the build details of your report? And I don't
like that.
care what size of organization you are. Like, if you're a one-man team, are you going to stay there forever? Right? Like, maybe it's your jam, whatever. But you shouldn't plan that way. Is your team never going to get bigger? Right? The minute you say, oh, yeah, I'm not the only person that's ever going to touch this thing. Like, at bare minimum, I'm not saying you're going to need the level of documentation that you may need to support an entire other team to understand how the calculations are built and everything. And they're going to be doing a lot of interaction with, the guts of the report. But at bare minimum, lay out the big details, right? Like, if anything, what are the big gaps that you don't understand in a report? I built 4 bookmarks. Here's the filter sets on all of them. So when you need to go add something, you can easily readjust the bookmarks because you're gonna screw them up, right? Like, inevitably, I think ultimately that is the most important thing to keep in mind, is equip other people. Like, if there's something you're doing that is going to be a challenge for you, if you just dropped into the report with no context, that would be the type of stuff that I would say should be part of your build process.
Yeah, this is on us for one, thinking that process would be a very straightforward conversation,
right,
and not a bunch of entanglements. But I'm going to disagree wholeheartedly, Mike, because not very, very much the first part that you said, where it's like, well, if you're on the sales team, then process, you can do a lot more with that interactive and the insights. Well, holy crap, is that where you can lead into a lot of problems? Because I was on the marketing team that was building lead reports. They asked that, can we look at leads based on form submissions? Sent that the marketing workspace. Marketing was looking at that. Well, sales was having a conversation, wall up between whoever was building reports and sales, and they were calling leads people they called. And there was no communication between each teams on that word leads. So when you're looking at a report and you're dealing with a very sensitive metric, before the report's even open, there has to be a process around what metrics are in there and how does it affect other teams.
But
to me,
that's a different topic, though. I'm going to disagree with you there.
Yeah,
it is. It is a different topic.
That is what that is. So a couple things that hung on there that I think you have to note, right? A sensitive KPI or a sensitive measure. There does need to be. You're talking about a metric that comes from the enterprise side. You just said, what defines a lead? And this also happens within companies. When I worked for a Fortune 100 company, everyone defines sales differently, and everyone is getting to the same different definition of sales.
Different dates.
But there needs to be an owner of what that KPI means, and that has to be conveyed to each team. So this is where I would say, like, again, I'm thinking about, like, I'm honing in, like, when I was talking about my process, I'm honing on really in, like, what is one report.
Okay.
But what you're talking about is very relevant, but there does need to be, like, the data dictionary. How do we define a lead? What is defining as sales? And different teams need to own different metrics and definitions of what that looks like. So the finance team defines when a sale happens. That's their job. The sales team can't say, oh, a sale is when we receive money. No, it's not. It's whatever the finance team says it's going to be. So there's actually, like, when you zoom out to the organization, there needs to be broader conversations at that, and I'm going to lack for a better term here, community of practice or center of excellence. Those individuals need to be heavy participants in defining what these things are. And when you define terms, like, there may be some other terms, like, what's a widget or what is a product.
Sure.
And there may be some things where you actually need cross collaboration to define what that is. And even master data management, there's probably multiple owners, like on a piece of data for a product, there is likely multiple owners of those data parts. And so those are actually owned by various different teams. Engineering may own part of it. Sales and marketing may own part of it. And so now you have multiple teams working together to define the same thing. Now that, I think, is IT supported.
Yeah, and I think this is why process is so hard. And I do agree with you. It's just maybe I had a lot of sleepless nights because of that lack beforehand.
We all did.
It comes
yeah. There's a lot of nights.
I agree with you.
What did I do? Yeah. But when you're starting a report, that's again, it's that dance between you, the stakeholder, and IT or whoever's managing those data sets. Needs to be the wheel should be turning on both sides.
But the shame on us. But shame on us for not putting this out there and letting that, like, even having a discussion across the organization to start defining what these things mean, and then when there is a disagreement, who settles it? Who defines what a lead is? And it's someone up the chain that says, no, we are going to define a lead as such. This is how we define it. But then again, this all boils back to, like, what, again, I'm going to go back to Matthew Roach thing. It's amazing. Like, he says you need a strong stakeholder. There needs to be someone who's supporting this and can say there are going to be conflicts and disagreements across different teams. And so you're going to have to get together in a meeting and figure out what these different definitions mean. And the center of excellence, you have to have that.
Right. And if you don't have someone who's going to start the wheels turning or stop the wheels, hey, buddy, I got 7 reports in my queue.
Yep.
And I got a lot of pressure coming to me. So I'm going to just start building.
Yeah.
I'm not.
It's the pressure's real.
Without that process going on.
Yeah.
So
we're talking about colliding processes, right?
Now we are.
What you described as data management, right? And end user, like, I would say this is where documentation or end user definitions of things belong in reports as part of your report build process. So if you don't want to, encounter this issue again, if people aren't looking at the definitions in the end user report that you provided them, you're doing your job, Tommy.
Right.
You're not responsible for, like, all of the organizational, technically you are. Technically,
you get
you
responsible
need to put it in
for
documentation. So COE, like large organization or small, I think that principle still, aligns, which is if there's differences in definitions, added in the end user's, information button somewhere.
And I love it too that I think none of us have opened a report Power BI file yet in the process. And here we are 45 minutes in. And I think there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
It's because you can't have the nice report unless all this is already established.
There's a lot of pre-work, I feel like. And again, I think your point was spot on in the beginning, managing expectations. All of these things that we've talked about have been around how do we manage those expectations early on. So when people say, hey, I just need a report that's 3 pages long and a table.
Never that.
And it's never that. It's never that simple, like, boop, okay, we're done, let's go. It's now this, well, what did you really want? And then you give them that report, whatever they just asked for, and all of a sudden it turns into this, like, well, that's not what I wanted. That's not helpful. I just asked for a table. This is not what I needed. I need more now. Like, and so we've been burned before by not, if we don't peel the onion back far enough, we don't get to the heart of the matter.
Completely agree.
Oh man, this is such a good topic.
Oh my God, this is a great one. So the last thing I'll say, because I know we are getting way past time, but the other thing you were talking about as you're whiteboarding and building out before you open PBIX, there's an article by Paul Turley that I think changed my life, so to speak.
Oh, wow. Paul.
Yeah.
Way to go, Paul.
Because we would do the same thing where you just try to build the report and then show it to them. But I'll try to send it out after, because I'm not nearly as good as finding articles as you on the fly, Mike.
I'm literally Googling right now.
But it's basically, he puts development into a 2-phase report. He called it the sandbox phase and then the development phase. And sandbox phase, he literally called Power BI, you're playing in a sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
He would have the report open. That would be ugly. It would literally be just a bunch of visuals on different pages, different layouts. And he used that to show the stakeholders, here's some different ideas I had. And as I have implemented that, and ever since I have, like I said, it has made me a literal just better professional, and not even Power BI, just a better worker. Just in general, it's improved all the skills. And I mean that because you're kind of fishing for insights where you're going through going, here's one idea that we had where we're looking at the number of leads going down, and then you can look at it based on the rep, and you get a stakeholder who has all these reactions where they go, okay, you go, well, that's not important to them, so let's scratch that. But I'm fishing for that person to look at and go, what could you do this, or what if could you add this? Then you are finding the insights. You are literally, the insights are floating up like you're a that's a bad analogy, but it's basically floating to the surface. We'll just say it straightforward.
You're boiling it, and what comes out, you're boiling it, and all the bad ideas are kind of evaporating out, and you've got you've distilled the real ideas out of that big pool of.
Do you know why? Do you know the like the one reason in my mind that is like one of the best ways to introduce data to people? Because everybody has an opinion, and you don't want it until the very end, right? Like you just want, we're trying to solve problems, and just as much as we're like, I think very well, at least some of us are very gun shy around like certain visuals.
Not gun shy. I just hate them. Not gun shy. I just hate them. They just won't be used ever. Sorry.
What are you talking about? Have some pie with your breakfast.
Pie charge.
Donut chart. The reverse can be said, right? And that's where keep it cut and dry, and then work towards prettying it up or making it how people want to visually see it.
It's a Google Maps to the report, because again, you don't have to work on 18 different layouts for things that are not going to be important. And we even tell them beforehand, this report's called a sandbox. We're literally going to play in the sandbox. I have the file up during the meeting so we can actually iterative do it on the fly.
I like that.
So
I like that a lot.
Rather than, because I used to do the whiteboard and we would do some other, like Canvas, I would try to do a lot other tools, but you have the freaking data in front of you it's drag and drop.
Yep.
So it makes it easy. The only reason I would not recommend it, because then people think your job's really easy because you just have to drag and drop a bar chart. But outside of that, I mean, that to me is the pivotal part of this, because again, then also they have a say. They're empowered. So it's not your report, it's their report.
I want to follow up with that question, Tommy. If you had to estimate, let's just say how long it takes you to build a report page. A request comes in, right? I'm looking at just rough timing, right? Someone comes in a report. Now, granted, they are all over the place. They could be, some could be very easy, some could be very hard. But just on average, what do you feel like you're building a report page? You potentially need to grab data, bring it in, and make a single page. How long does that take you?
You and I both know that's a loaded question, but I will say, let's say, when I worked in a marketing agency, my boss told me something that I'll always remember. He said, overestimate. Always overestimate. So I always give them something that I think it may be done earlier, but I'll say 3 to 5 weeks, but it could be done a lot sooner.
For a page?
No, a page. Okay, a page.
But a whole report, yes.
Data model? Okay.
Depends. Yeah, for a whole report, maybe.
A whole page, 5 to 10 days. Overestimating though.
That's like
if you don't
that's
have,
like 3x what I would estimate.
Hold on. Are you building the data model?
Yeah.
Or is the data model already done?
Well, I'm building data model, measures, and a report page.
Okay, so you're building all that. Again, I very much learned how to overestimate.
Well, I'll also say you do way more documentation than I do. Don't think about documentation at this point. Just think about build.
You could do it in a day to 5.
Day to 5.
1 to 5.
So 1 day to a year. Got it. It could be anything. I'm with you though. It's hard to estimate on the fly because you don't know what you don't know. Okay. Yeah. Seth, what would you call your time? What would be like in your mind? How long should it take you to build a page? Model, data, measures.
Yeah, I think we landed on our sweet spot was 3 days a page. For just in average, because if it compounds, right? So typically, very rarely am I building one page reports.
Very rarely.
So it's 2 or 3. So some of the things it takes longer to figure out in that 3 days, related to model calculations. The other pages tend to kind of accelerate. So if it's 3 pages, it's like 9 days.
Yep. And
it's on average, right?
I feel like when you're talking about page design, most of it is pretty straightforward. Grabbing slicers, getting a couple bar charts, that stuff is standard. There's usually one portion in that model or that data model There or one or a couple areas. There's a couple areas where you need to go deeper into the DAX. So there's likely one or two visuals, or when the request comes in is, can you color this thing? At that point, that's when things get long, because those are kind of those sinks for me. Like if I'm just straight building reports without a lot of styling on top of them, it goes fairly quick. I could say, it might even be like a day to build a page.
Yeah.
You can just burn through it.
Yeah.
I would say, like, the only caveat to mine now would be, I'd say 3 days per page plus a day for documentation and, wrapping it up, right? A day or two.
Yeah. And if you're connecting to a live data set, and it's usually if it's just like a subset of the report, I've had a few reports based on that where I was like, wow, I'm done. I have 3 pages. That took a
just
few
means
hours.
you get 6 days off, right?
That hasn't worked so far, but I'll try that next time.
Oh man,
awesome!
I would love to keep talking, fellas.
I know, agree.
As every podcast, however,
I can't wait 5 more days.
Tommy goes through withdrawal halfway through the weekend.
I'm trying to talk. Yeah, every time I get my Sarah next to the microphone, my wife, and I go, okay, I have a topic.
She's like, I still don't care, Tommy.
So I wonder, did we actually answer the question at all about process?
Yeah, I think we did.
Okay.
I think we covered it in depth.
So we're done.
Well, I would say I think there's a revisit on this topic. I think it'd be relevant to say what is lacking or what are hurdles that you have found in your BI process. That's one of the notes you made, Tommy, that I thought was really relevant here. And then I'd also like to, I think this is going to be a continual theme and conversation point will be, how do you manage and govern your process? What, when do you bend the rules a little bit, and when do you not? Like, do you ever not bend the rules? Like, there's a lot of, I think, other questions that are on the periphery of this that I really like this conversation. And again, I think you guys have opened my mind up again. I keep liking talking with other people who have different experiences here, because we all had 3 kind of different perspectives on the process, what it is, and how do you make it work well. So really appreciate it. Tommy, where can you find the Explicit Measures podcast?
You can find the podcast anywhere podcasts are available, on Spotify, Apple, Overcast, Google Podcasts. Episodes come out the same day we do the live event. If you can't, if for those who are listening to the podcast right now on Apple or Spotify, if you want to join in the conversation, you can do so every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 Central Time. Get the link from LinkedIn or Twitter, or just subscribe to the Power BI Tips YouTube page.
Awesome. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're going to keep up with great content, more podcasts coming on their way. And Tommy and I are working on a dedicated page on the PowerBI.tips website, so we can have all the podcasts in video form, and subscriptions to the other areas will also be on the Power BI Tips website here pretty soon. And we'd also like to introduce a mailbag. Mail time. So we're going to try to solicit people for ideas, questions, things you want us to talk about, or other topics we can get into this. We have a whole bunch of them already in just our own conversations in general, but we would love to have more feedback from the community. And please, if you like this content, please give us a comment below. Let us know if there's some other topic you'd like us to touch on. Anyways, thank you all very much, and we'll see you.
Have a great weekend.
On Tuesday.
See you guys on Tuesday.
Oh man, it's so far away.
I know.
See you guys.
So far.
Bye.